Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
Cary Harrison with you, and they say evil doesn't span eternity without just a little help. Sometimes our heroes use satire and humor to show the sides of life often too painful to look at directly. Well, this was the method of Mark Twain and Jonathan Swift, who were able to look at issues of the day and still fly under the radar. Well, in today's narcissistic, selfie-obsessed culture, what better way than to set it to a classic? We've all heard of Dracula. We know the various stories of the seductive vampire. So why is the latest Dracula movie, starring Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult, called Renfield? Well, in this modern monster tale of Dracula's loyal servant Renfield, Nicholas Hoult, Mad Max, Fury Road, the X-Men's franchise, he stars as Renfield, the tortured aide to history's most narcissistic boss, Dracula, played by Oscar winner Nicolas Cage. You see, Renfield is forced to procure his master's prey and do his every bidding, no matter how debased. But now, after centuries of servitude, Renfield is ready to see if there's a life outside the shadow of the Prince of Darkness. If only he could figure out how to end his own codependency. Renfield's based on the original idea by the Walking Dead creator Robert Kirkman, so you know why it's a favorite. Nicolas Cage, you had to reinterpret Dracula from the Bela Lugosi version. Hell, even Leslie Nielsen played Dracula at one point. But you had to figure out how a modern Dracula would speak, given the most famous model was Bela Lugosi's Hungarian accent.
Well, the words, "I am Dracula," I wanted to channel a little of the Transylvanian voice, but by and large, my favorite Dracula is Christopher Lee, who has a British sound. My father was the biggest influence for Dracula, who had a mid-Atlantic sound. What I didn't want to do was have a goofy Transylvanian sound in the role, so I thought my father, whom I channeled in a little movie I made called Vampire's Kiss, was a great starting point for the way this Dracula speaks. You know, let me explain something to you, okay? Dracula.
Nicholas Hoult, the original Renfield, was a character from the Dracula novel written by Bram Stoker in 1897, and in exchange for a steady supply of insects and the promise of immortality, Renfield served as Count Dracula's insane and fanatically devoted codependent.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you okay? I need to get out of a toxic relationship.
Why don't you start by telling us what brought you here?
My boss, he's different.
You can't get him out of your head.
No.
I need your assistance.
I'm coming, Master!
Oh, you feel like he could destroy you with the snap of his fingers.
Wouldn't even need to snap. Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, what?
Obviously, you go back to the novel a lot to figure out how Renfield began as a character and as a person, and then the 31 film is brilliant because Dwight Frye's performance is so iconic. So stealing things from that when I can. I love his laugh, obviously, and that's such a piece of the character, so trying to pepper that in. But then this is also 100 years later, so I mean, that's very kind of you to say that they feel like bookends, because it's then thinking, you know, how have these characters developed over that time, and that's what I loved with what Nick did to it. You know, he brings a lot of these two characters, you know, they're together, but they love each other, and they also are tormenting each other, and there's so much hurt even in Dracula.
Nick Cage, much of your prep for playing this very physical Dracula looked like Tai Chi workouts and practicing foreign languages.
Well, it was just more of a reaffirmation, if you will, that so much can be conveyed with voice and just your eyes, that even though I'm under 20 pounds of makeup, the performance still can come through with voice and eyes. That's really what I learned from it.
Renfield, bring me innocent victims. I want a handful of nuns, a busload of cheerleaders.
And I just want a normal life again. Let me explain. My boss gave me this power. In return, I tend to his needs, including care, feeding.
You bring in people to eat? You're like the guy that gets the villain's Postmates.
But if you were to stop focusing on his needs, what would happen?
He won't grow to full power.
Exactly. He won't grow to full power. What? That's so weird. Why would you phrase it like that? But yes. Hi, are you here for the meeting? Well, come on. No!
Some call me the Dark One, others the Lord of Death. To most, I am Dracula.
Okay, obviously we're dealing with a little bit more than just narcissism here.
Now, let's eat.
Nicolas Hoult, you play Renfield as a multifaceted figure with both admirable and repellent qualities simultaneously. Despite Renfield's obvious mental illness, he's surprisingly astute, he's crafty, and in the Dracula book, Renfield is like a moth to the flame of Dracula's charisma and power. Renfield will even give up his humanity if it means winning Dracula's approval, and that's saying something. As they say in your movie poster about Renfield, it sucks to be him.
I think for Renfield, when he's first under Dracula's control, there's a wildness and a craziness to him in the novel at times, where he's kind of losing a little bit of his senses. And I think for this story, I think he's that crazy. It's like the beginning of a love, when all your chemicals inside of your brain are playing up and you're not really sure what's going on. I think that chemical release has died down for him, so he's more subdued than those roles.
Well, I think it was more just really trying to find the tone. I'm trying to find this bullseye between comedy and horror, which I don't think has been explored that much. I was often thinking about American Werewolf in London, and that's a bullseye Chris McKay and I really wanted to hit. So I was always trying to be conscious of the tone of this particular piece. It's an R-rated fantasy, but it's hilarious, and that's a balance that you have to find. And thankfully, Nick is someone who has tremendous wit and comic timing, so we were able to riff off of each other. I was always thinking about that.
Cary Harrison with you, talking actors Nicolas Cage and Nicolas Hoult in the Dracula remake of Renfield, directed by Chris McKay and produced by The Walking Dead's Robert Kirkman. Producer Robert Kirkman, you've kept us up at night with the many iterations of your Walking Dead stories, which tend to speak to the world that many of us feel we're eyewitnessing every day. And director Chris McKay, you've given us hardcore action movies like The Tomorrow War and the Lego Batman movie, but Renfield is a goulash of hard action mixed with splatstick humor, as they say, that takes Bram Stoker to a new level, especially using Nicolas Cage almost 100 years later as the modern Dracula.
As we were talking about what Dracula should look like just in general, for me, I wanted to synthesize stuff, whether it was the Bela Lugosi, the Christopher Lee, I wanted,
Gary
Oldman, and from the book, from the Stoker novel, I wanted, elements of that. So that's why you have a top hat in one scene, you have a cane. That's from the Stoker novel. The teeth, I wanted to kind of mimic the Lon Chaney Sr. London After Midnight, all sharp teeth, using Bela Lugosi's outfit and Christopher Lee's when Dracula gets bloodlust, we use those contact lenses that Christopher Lee had in the Hammer movies when he gets blood, the bloodlust. So it was part of it was just synthesizing stuff. When Cage came in, we had to sort of describe Dracula as like a rock and roll Dracula. We wanted it to kind of be really flashy and big. So, Cage came in and the rings, that's where we got the rings and the fur and all of the, kind of really, soft and tactile textures and that sort of thing in the costume. So that was, it was a lot of...
I just want to say I was absolutely essential to this process because I would go, that looks really cool.
I wanted to play with the movement because that's a way into Dracula that we haven't seen much. When you see cobras, they try to seduce you, and then they try to hypnotize you by moving like that, and then they go like that. And I wanted Dracula to have some of that.
Robert Kirkman, the only other comedy Dracula that I can remember was Leslie Nielsen in Dracula Dead and Loving It. But what you guys did with Nick Cage is truly next level stuff.
Yeah, we were doing camera tests, and Chris had set up this amazing set, and they were smoking the area, and I have never really seen a director go hard on camera tests like this. And Cage walked in, and it was dark and creepy, and there were candelabras everywhere, and he was in costume, and it was like it just transports you. And just the way he walks, the way he turns his head, like everything was quintessential Dracula. It was phenomenal.
And I don't know if you stayed for the end credits of the movie, but in the end credits of the film, where you have some that you see some of the camera tests as the end credits play.
Yeah.
I like anything that stimulates my imagination. Vampire movies invite the realm of fantasy or magic, and so I always have been a fan. Let's eat.
Been truly one of the highlights of my career watching Nick Cage play Dracula.
Director Chris McKay, as a Stooges fan, I always enjoyed slapstick humor, and I'm brave enough to freely admit it, obviously. But in the horror genre, there's a famous term, splatstick humor.
Splatstick humor's kind of been around for a long time, and movies like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 kind of perfected, splatstick humor. So I think that there's like a natural connection between humor and horror, and I think even the way, just from a structural standpoint, the way you develop a scare and the way you develop a joke.
Those jump scares and moments of terror in a film, like they take you off balance and they pull you out of yourself. That's one of the reasons why they're so appealing. And I think when you're in that zone, you can't help but laugh because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to me. So it makes the marrying of the genres like really possible and really work when it's done well, because that moment when you're laughing, you can kind of feel yourself like, am I going to be terrified here, or is this going to be funny? And there's like a nice sweet spot where those two feelings diverge that I think you can really kind of hit.
Cary Harrison here, and we've had a look at both heroes and villains and that odd mix of both shadow and light that all of us humans seem to possess. And what better than a Dracula movie to play out the good, the bad, and the ugly? You'll enjoy the creative mayhem in Renfield and relate to virtually every aspect of humanity and superhumanity that the great Robert Kirkman has issued from his fevered brow through these well-known actors like Nick Cage and Nicolas Hoult, who brought it home for us.
From the very early age of 4 or 5, my father would play black and white. We had a 35 millimeter projector on a screen he would put up in our living room, and he would play black and white silent films, and one of them was Nosferatu with Max Schreck. Let me tell you something. When you see that movie when you're 5 in black and white with him doing those crazy things with his eyes and his fingers, that leaves an indelible impression. It doesn't go away.
Cary Harrison, and this is Rethinking Heroes.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. Life after the military. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call now.